Nashville Predators begin preseason with a pair of losses to the Florida Panthers. We'll talk about the big takeaways from the game and a couple of players that stood out. Plus, Andrew Brunette talks about how he's going to utilize his four lines during the regular season. That's today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day, every single day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I want to start out with a special hello to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys. We appreciate the support you give us week after week. I'm Nick Morgan. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at the Hockey News.
Today's episode also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Speaking of getting started, Ann, preseason underway for the Nashville Predators. The final score for both of those games, 5-0 in favor of Florida and 5-2 in favor of Florida. Before we dive in, let's get two caveats.
Okay.
Number one, it's preseason.
It's preseason, y'all.
Number two, there's no Forsberg, no Ryan O'Reilly, or no Roman Josi in either of these games. So the Preds' three best skaters were not on the ice.
Yeah.
And then one more caveat. It's preseason, Ann. It's preseason.
It's preseason, y'all. It was a disappointing, I will say that it was a disappointing first two games in the sense that there was so much excitement about what we saw in training camp, and I'm not sure it translated onto the ice like we would have liked it to right away. But I think there's even more caveats than the first three. I want to add that it's preseason, y'all. So there's caveat number 4. But also, you had Andrew Brunette really using these two games to kind of sift through some of the depth pieces, I think, whereas you had the Florida Panthers not sifting through depth pieces near as much. They didn't, play all of their top guys, but hey, what's up, Matthew Tkachuk out on the ice? Hey, Nick Cousins, fancy meeting you here. So it really was two teams that used these preseason matchups, I think, for two very different reasons, because these two teams are at very different places. So I think everybody, for as disappointing as it was, I think there were glimpses of some of how Andrew Brunette wants to play, just glimpses of it. But I don't think that Nashville Predators fans got the full buffet of what Brunette wants to do and how that's going to look. Because like you said, didn't have Forsberg, didn't have Josi, you didn't have McDonough, you didn't have Tyson Barrie, you didn't have Luke Shen. So grain of salt, this one, y'all. Just take a grain of salt with this one.
Yeah.
10-2.
If there is one, big thing to take away, maybe from like the regular season standpoint, UC Saros, still hasn't gotten over the first game or two is really, really bad thing that he had going on. Because that outing in game 2 looked rough. And again, like I thought the harder thing to kind of, digest from that is I thought in game 2, the Predators looked a lot better on both ends of the ice than they did in game 1.
Yeah.
And that was the one that was like 4-0 early on. So
yeah. Now I will say this, and not that UC Saros needs anyone to make excuses for him because he'll be hoisting a Vezina one day. But 2 of those 4 goals did bounce off of a Nashville Predators player, which, That's how goals are scored in hockey too. A goal is a goal. Doesn't matter how, matters how many. But yeah, and we all know UC Saros is a crock pot. Okay, he's not a microwave. This is UC Saros. He's a crock pot. He's got to warm up, y'all. But when he does, it is a way better dish than a microwave.
Making me hungry early.
I know, seriously.
I need to get like some shredded chicken or something like that going right now.
I have a great shredded chicken recipe you should try.
Hell yeah, that needs to be another podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. I'll share my crack chicken recipe.
Absolutely. Let's go. And what else stood out for you, either in game 1 or game 2?
I think that there were definitely a couple of players that stood out, but just kind of overall, I think you were seeing, and I touched on this earlier, I think Andrew Brunette really went into this kind of sifting players, kind of looking for, okay, like who were the ones that were like, hey, we really kind of want to, we want to take a longer look at these guys. And who are the ones that were like, hey, they're young. We know they're going to need a little more seasoning in that kind of thing. After the game, he talked with Emma Lingen and he said, it was good to get my eyes on a lot of different players. I'm still kind of familiarizing myself with everyone. So I think you have to remember that. And again, these are two teams in two very different places. Paul Maurice obviously knows most of his team pretty well after last season. He knows the skill sets of all of the players. Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz are really familiarizing themselves with so many of these people. And because there's this huge pool of younger players, it's going to take some time. So for me, I think a lot of eyes were on the younger players. I was surprised we didn't see a ton from that really kind of stood out like I would have liked from Kamel. He did have a great one-timer that snapped his stick. So, not much there, but, this is a young player who's hungry for that shot. I thought in game 1, I still really like the Sherwood Novak combination they played with Phil Tomasino. I think that's a combination that just keep your eye on. I think that there is something there. I think Andrew Brunette really kind of wants to chew on that line a little bit longer, a little bit more. So, and we're going to talk about Andrew Brunette and lines because he kind of opened up about his philosophy in training camps. We're going to talk about that too. But those were kind of the bigger things that stood out to me. I feel like, especially in game 1, that first line, didn't see as much from Nyquist Glass and Garyanov as I would have liked to have seen. But again, y'all, it's preseason, y'all.
Yeah. We'll talk about a couple more standouts coming up in just a second. Plus, Andrew Brunette did talk about how he's going to roll out lines in the regular season. Is he going to kind of mix and match? Is he going to have some identity lines out there? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit, plus more from both games 1 and 2 of the preseason. But first, I want to mention today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, you can snap into NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And that's because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, how many points are a certain team going to win by, player props, how many passing yards is Ryan Tannehill going to get, rushing yards is Derrick Henry going to get, is he going to score a rushing touchdown, over-unders on point totals, and much, much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, and we are talking takeaways from games 1 and games 2 of the Predators preseason doubleheader. You talked about something that I wanted to hit on, which was, I think, the big standout from game 1 was that, I guess, top line, or at least top line from, the game they were playing,
Right.
of Novak Sherwood and Tomasino. Remember, this was kind of a combination at the end of
Mhm.
last year. Novak and Sherwood wound up playing with each other at the end of the year and had good chemistry. And they didn't score a goal, in this preseason game, obviously, but I thought you saw them play and kind of show signs of, maybe like, at least in terms of like skating and positioning, what this might look like under Andrew Brunette a little bit. I thought there was good movement between
Mhm.
the three. I thought there was good passing, good chemistry. But, the only thing was they just weren't able to finish.
Right.
That's, I think certainly going to be like the biggest question mark, not just, for these players, but for everybody on the Preds roster is, who's going to be the guys that finish the chances. That was kind of the big question mark a lot last year when you and I talked about it was, hey, they looked good. Like a lot of the positioning was good. Like power play looked good. It was just nobody could actually get there and finish their chances.
Right.
That you maybe a little bit of concern, but you do like the way that those three and a couple of other players looked when they were on the ice. A lot of pressure, a lot of speed, a lot of movement. They're just going to have to figure out a way to finish the shots.
Yeah, I agree with you. This was by far kind of my favorite combination in that first game. And Alex Darty had a great article y'all need to check out at Penalty Box Radio where he talked with Tommy Novak. Thought it was a great piece. But Tommy Novak is so good at reading the ice. Aaron Sims from the Milwaukee Admirals, when I talked to him, called Tommy Novak the smartest player on the ice. And you really see the way that he reads the game and anticipates the game and kind of watches what's unfolding and pieces it together. It's very Doctor Strange-ish to me, what he does. But then you see Kiefer Sherwood, and Kiefer Sherwood has speed and he plays a very physical game. He very hard on the puck, that kind of thing. And then you've got Phil Tomasino that I think has played a better two-way game. And he's a player I think that can finish. I think he and Novak really can finish. They just need to. So I like this line combination a lot. I like the energy of it. I think these three guys really like playing together. I think they understand each other's game really well. So I'm hopeful that this is a line that we're going to get to see a couple more times in preseason. I wouldn't be totally shocked, Nick, if this is a line that maybe we see in the regular season. Now, I know Andrew Brunette's got a lot of sifting to do, but I really think that combination has a ton of potential.
Yeah, and Tomasino playing with them as well. He kind of moved
Yeah.
around a lot at the end of last season, but if you're looking for a place for Tomasino, that combination looks pretty well.
Yeah.
Let's move on to game 2, and this was one where I guess more regular Nashville Predators played.
Yes, more experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the right way. Like they
Yeah.
had, Colton Sissons, Yakov Trenin, Cody Glass, Jeremy Lazan, Alexander Carrier, and then of course Saros and net. The one person, you mentioned off the top, like, Cody Glass and Gustav Nyquist. That pairing, was kind of quiet all
Mhm.
game. I will say, somebody else that I was a little surprised that I didn't see or hear much of during the game was not Phil Tomasino, Luke Evangelista. That's
Yeah.
another one that I was, a little bit, surprised that we didn't hear more of.
Yeah, and he played on a line with Colton Sissons and Yakov Trenin, which I'm gonna be honest, love that combination. But Evangelista kind of just got a little bit lost in the game. And I don't mean that as he wasn't keeping up. I mean, just the way that the game was unfolding. I don't feel like we got to see, he didn't get a chance to really kind of highlight his skill set, his game. This is a kid who is great at carrying the puck through traffic. This is a kid who's great at, generating offensive chances. In game 2 was better than game 1 as far as offensive chances, but I don't know that we really got to see as much from Evangelista in this game as we would have liked. Definitely not the same Evangelista we saw at the end of last year, but again, it's like apples and oranges. So I was a little bit surprised by that as well. I thought, especially with Trenin and Sissons, what a great spot for Luke Evangelista to land there. And I wouldn't, regardless of yesterday, don't count out that combination again is something that Brunette may take a long look at. because I like it. But yeah, Evangelista was one that I was kind of like, I know you've got more in the tank there, friend. So, nobody panic. It's preseason, y'all. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've kind of felt that way too. I thought, it didn't showcase what he's capable of. There was one player though, Nick, that I thought took full advantage of this preseason game. And I would go so far as to say he was probably my standout player of both games.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mark Delgado, y'all.
Interesting. Yeah.
I know. And not somebody that I necessarily went into game 2 saying, all right, I really want to keep my eye on Mark Delgado. But I thought Mark Delgado's game was fantastic. This is somebody who, stood up Matthew Tkachuk at the blue line, interrupted passes. He got time on the penalty kill, very effective on the penalty kill. Calm, confident, moving the puck under pressure. I thought defensively, he was where he needed to be. So much about his game stood out. And I was really glad for him. We actually talked to Delgado at training camp this week. And it was one of the more interesting conversations that we had with the players, because he came in and he was like, look, I'm my goal, I'm going to make this team. Like, my goal is making the Predators team.
Mm.
And I have a chip on my shoulder because I didn't get my chance last year. All these call-ups, all these injuries, I didn't get called up, and I have a chip on my shoulder about that. And he does. Like, Mark Delgado's like, you all missed out on this. So I thought he had a great game and did a ton with his opportunities last night.
No, we kind of forgot about Mark Delgado, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because we talked about him for a while, like being sort of a sort of a guy that maybe was going to be a future NHL blue liner for a while, and then it just seems like he fell down the depth chart a little
Yeah.
bit. You saw guys like Spencer Stastny come up, but the Predators signed Jake Livingstone, who I also thought played a pretty good game
Yes.
yesterday as well. And there's other people in the system like Jack Mateer, and Ryan Ufko up in UMass that a lot of I think people are like, okay, like those are more NHL ready guys than Mark Delgado. And I think Delgado is starting to show maybe just a little bit of why we thought that about him a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Because I think he has been sharp, and not just in this preseason, but I thought he's looked really good in camp as well, and has been sharp, and you don't see him making a ton of mistakes. So it's interesting, and all this talk about the defense, and we're kind of like, is Spencer Stastny going to be the first one up? Is when is Jake Livingstone going to appear? Is he going to maybe throw his hat into the competition? That we really haven't asked, like, hey, is Mark Delgado ready to compete a little bit here?
Yeah. And I thought he did everything that they would have wanted to see from him. And I thought his game was the best. It was the player who really stood out to me as somebody who made me say, hey, no, wait a second. This is a guy who is ready. And, there is so much depth in the defensive position that it's really, you almost want to say to Mark Delgado, like, hey, do you know the guys that are in front of you? We've got like 7 guys with NHL experience, and then we've got all you other ones, but there are no excuses from him this week at training camp. Like, he wants to make this team. And I thought, man, did he take great advantage of his opportunity in game 2. So he was, for me, the standout player from yesterday.
Yeah. We are going to talk about lines coming up in just a second, because I think that is what everybody in Nashville is really keeping their eye on as we head to the regular season. How's Andrew Brunette going to play his lines? Is he going to have like checking lines, scoring lines? Is he going to be roll things out maybe a little bit more evenly? We're going to talk about that in just 1 second. But first, I want to remind everybody that Locked On Predators is your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, on Apple Music, on Spotify, Amazon, wherever you're listening. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll always know when we have new content out for you. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking with Jack Bushman from Locked on Blackhawks. Lots to talk about in terms of the Blackhawks, including that new guy they have on their team now, whatever his name is. Some of the big offseason changes for both teams, realistic expectations, and maybe how we can get that Preds Blackhawks rivalry firing a little bit more again. So that's coming up tomorrow on the Locked on Predators podcast. All right, Ann, we are talking lines today. Andrew Brunette's line strategy, of course. This is a big thing because a lot of people were not happy with how John Hynes rolled out his line combinations. More of the, we're going to have these players do this and these players do this. Early on, the indication is that John Hynes would like to kind of even things out a little bit. Maybe have some, I guess 4 solid lines that he can turn to.
Yeah, a little Seattle Kraken-ish, as
Right.
we like to say.
That's kind of the
Yeah.
example, because that was, when we talked about this last year, that was the example we used. And, the David Poyle, when he was talking about, why Ellie Tolvin was working in Seattle and not necessarily Nashville, that was what he used. He's like, well, Seattle plays things a little bit differently. They like to roll out, kind of 4 lines that are sort of evenly matched that they can play in any sort of situation. And everybody in Nashville was like, why aren't we trying that? Aren't we having a problem with scoring? Like, shouldn't we try to balance this a little bit? Shouldn't we try to get some of the depth guys, like, maybe get a chance to get like 30 points?
Just throwing it out there and seeing what sticks, David Poyle. Yeah. And so we kind of talked with Andrew Brunette this week, just feeling out like, hey, what is your philosophy on, how do you use your lines? Do you have a checking line? Do you have a, whatever? This is what Andrew Brunette had to say about kind of how he envisions the lines.
I don't really, I'm not really anybody that gets, my coaching style is not really stuck on 2 lines. I like 4 lines, and I like balance, and I like guys that chase pucks and hard on pucks and relentless, and he fits that mold. And we've had a lot of guys this camp so far that I've been impressed with. Even looking at Phil, I thought he's been really tenacious on pucks, skating extremely well, which is fun to see. Ryan OReilly's as good on a puck as anybody in the league, and I'm watching him get those pucks. He's got great anticipation and hockey sense. So. They don't really slot guys in. They'll slot themselves in as we get going.
Yeah. And
hallelujah, y'all.
Yeah. And I kind of like the implication of, he wants all 4 lines to do a little bit of everything. And I think that's why in particular, he called out, Philip Forsberg and Ryan OReilly in that bite. He's like, look, as good as scorers they are, they're also really strong at playing defense and kind of, chasing the puck and getting the puck back. It seems like that's something that's going to be important for Andrew Brunette. It's like, look, I don't care if you're the first line, like you're going to be, playing a 2-way style. Like I want you to, play this way throughout. I want you to kind of play the same way our 4th line would play, and chasing the puck. And at least early on, and it seems like some of the top players like Philip Forsberg have really sort of embraced that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this bodes well for the Predators, especially when you look at the style of play that Andrew Brunette wants to play, because he wants to play fast. He wants to get the puck up the ice, but you have to be able, everybody on the ice has to be able to play a good 2-way game if you're going to do that. Like you just have to be able to do that. And so I like this. We're all pulling in the same direction. We're all working on playing this particular style of hockey. And there was not a lot, but, there was a very noticeable disparity in, time on ice. I don't know how that's going to play out with Andrew Brunette, but I think if he can get 4 lines that are playing the style, the way that he wants them to play, I do think even time may even out. Now, you're going to see Philip Forsberg and Ryan OReilly out there the most, I'm sure.
Right.
But you look at, like I'm just throwing this out there. Like this is pure speculation on my part. But if you had a first line of Forsberg, OReilly, and someone else, It could be Cole Smith. Everybody, I don't know. Then you have Gus Nyquist, Cody Glass, Dennis Gurianov. You have Trenton Sissons, Evangelista, Sherwood, Novak, Tomasino. Let's just say for pretend those end up being your 4 lines. Those are 4 scoring lines. Those
Right.
are also 4 lines that have guys that have good two-way game. You've got guys that can kind of do more than just one thing. So I really think you're going to see a little bit more even ice time. Although again, Ryan O'Reilly and Philip Forsberg are going to be your main folk.
Well, I think it's also you're going to have different people on different lines that do add some different dimensions. For instance, you might have a Colton Sissons with somebody like a Luke Evangelista.
Yes.
Somebody who's really speedy and can get to the net with somebody who can kind of be an anchor. But, as we've seen from Colton Sissons, he's capable of scoring like 30 points. And that's all you really need from him.
Right.
To get like good depth numbers. Like we mentioned, who did we talk about yesterday? Cole Smith with Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be the combination when camp is over, but it gives you an idea of, hey, like, we may have, players of, maybe different things they're skilled at playing together. So we get more of a balanced look throughout the lineup. There's a lot of teams that have done that, as opposed to, okay, all of our scores are going to be here. The defensive specialists are going to be here. It's funny because what was the most exciting line on the Nashville Predators a couple of years ago, Ann?
Joe. Oh, the herd line. Yeah. I was going way back.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
I know.
But still, yeah. But the herd line and what was their thing? Like they were like, the defensive specialists, the guys that could play out of their, defensive zone and still push up and make a good play and, score all this offense while being, sort of labeled as the defensive guys. You may be looking at like 3 or 4 herd lines.
Yeah.
For the Nashville Predators, like players that can play that sort of style and with that sort of energy.
Yeah. And I think that it opens up a lot of opportunity. One of the things we know the Nashville Predators have got to do as they kind of take on this reset, they've got to score more goals. They have to score more goals. And you can't just count on your top 2 lines to score goals for you. And I think the Predators leaned on that a little bit too much maybe in the past. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Brunette pieces this together. I think it's going to be very interesting to see, I kind of have in my mind, just, hey, maybe this is the lineup, but I think that there is so much room for another player to weasel their way into this. So there's still so much to be decided at this training camp. And, we learned a little bit in the preseason game tomorrow night. Of course, there's a preseason game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, assuming we're going to see some different combinations. So, let's just breathe through what we saw yesterday and take away what we can take away from it and see what happens tomorrow night. But yeah, a lot of options for Andrew Brunette, and he's got to have the time to sift through them all.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see who plays tomorrow night as well. We're going to see what happens there. Reminder, tomorrow on the Locked On Predators podcast, we are talking with Jack Bushman from Locked On Blackhawks, continuing our off-season frenemy series. We got a couple more to get to still, so stay tuned for that. Also, later this week, we're going to put Yaroslav Askarov under the microscope. How has he looked in camp? What's the expectations for him this season? And when is he possibly going to be on the Nashville Predators roster? That's coming up. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter X at @AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com or follow me at _NS Morgan. Also, be sure to follow our podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Just search Locked On Predators or find us on Twitter at LO_Predators. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back with an all-new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.